Welcome to Pave's Garage. In this video, we're going to look at the history of the Mitsubishi Pajero, and then have a real in-depth technical look at the Pajero evolution.
砂漠は海だ。お前は風だ。パジェロ。
So before we get to all the Gucci details about what makes this thing so awesome, let's take a quick look at the history of the Pajero to see where the Evo came from. The first Pajero came into production in 1982 to compete in the ever-growing 4x4 market. It was a fairly simple design, incorporating independent front suspension, solid rear axle on leaf springs, and had a reasonably advanced selectable four-wheel drive system. In its first year of production, it was only offered as a two-door, but in subsequent years it was offered as a four-door and came in a variety of trim levels, ranging from a really rugged agricultural spec all the way up to a sort of wannabe Lexus luxury spec. There was a whole lot of engines available for the Pajero. They ranged from some pretty knotty petrol engines to some pretty good diesels, but the top of the line one was the 3-litre V6. Pretty soon after its launch, the Pajero grabbed the attention of off-road racers. Its short wheelbase meant it was fairly light, and its large V6 engine meant it had a pretty good power to weight ratio. This, along with its independent front suspension, which reduces the chance of you being bogged in sand, meant the Pajero was a prime candidate to compete in the Dakar. So in the following year, it competed for the first time, coming in a respectable third place. And then in 1985, the Pajero won its first Dakar rally, and this was going to be the start of its long history of success in the Dakar rally.
Even these four-wheel drives, the Toyotas, the Mitsubishis of Cowan and Zanaroli, they're still only modified production vehicles. The one-off raid specials have yet to make their debut.
The Pajero's success at the Dakar rally helped it become a great sales success too. It sold 16,000 units in its first year of sales when it was only offered as a short wheelbase, and then in 1988 it cracked 100,000 units being sold in 1 year for the first time. Then in 1991, the second generation Pajero rocked up.
新たなるパワー、さらなるウェルバランスでパジェロ一新。パリダカールの勝利が今ここに決する。ニューパジェロ登場。
It followed the same basic makeup as the first generation, except everything was just made a little bit better and more modern. In the 1990s, the Pajero continued its dominance at the Dakar rally, winning in 1992 and 93 in the T2 production class of the race. But Mitsubishi weren't satisfied with just winning most of the races, they wanted to absolutely dominate. So in the mid-90s, Mitsubishi decided to exploit its section of the FIA T2 production vehicle rules, which define a production vehicle as any vehicle which has had at least 2,500 road-legal homologated units produced. So of course, Mitsubishi made 2,500 Dakar Rally-ready Pajeros, slapped an Evo badge on it, called it a production car, and then entered it into the Dakar Rally.
Pajero Evolution Debut.
Mitsubishi went through this crazy expensive process in the hope that dominating the Dakar Rally would generate enough good publicity and sales for their standard Pajeros that would offset the costs of generating such a ridiculous car. The process of doing this is what's called making a homologation special. The process of manufacturers going out and making the minimum number of production cars required to compete in a particular race is what's given us such awesome cars such as the Ford RS200, the E30 M3, Subaru WRX 22B, and of course most of the Evos. So, what got changed on the Pajero Evo compared to the standard Generation 2 Pajeros? And I'm going to break out some notes here. So, starting off with the chassis. The Pajero Evo shares a ladder frame chassis with the standard Pajero, except it's had a whole bunch of extra bracing added to it, which stiffens and strengthens the chassis by almost double. Attached to that chassis is what Mitsubishi decided to call the all-road multi-link independent suspension for evolution, aka ARMY, obviously. And that's the start of quite a few ridiculous acronyms in this video. At the front, the Pajero Evo has independent double wishbone suspension with the coilover spring as opposed to a torsion bar spring that is found on the standard Pajero. The arms are wider compared to the standard Pajero, which brings the track out to 1.59 metres or 12.5 centimetres wider than the standard Pajero. Wheel travel increased from 18 to 24 centimetres and the sway bars were beefed up with an extra 2 millimetres of thickness. At the back, the 3-link solid axle suspension of the standard Pajero was swapped out for a multi-link independent system. This raises the rear differential up higher, making it a lot harder for the Pajero Evo to get bogged in the sand, which is pretty important when your hub's deep in the middle of a desert. The track width was also increased by 11 centimetres, bringing it up to 1.59 metres, the same as the front. And to cover this extra track width, the Evo got some of the nicest box flares that probably exist on any vehicle, including the BMW E30 M3 or even the Lancia Delta Integrale. Rear suspension travel increased from 24 up to 27 centimetres and the sway bars were increased from 20 centimetres up to 26 to keep the thing stable through the corners. Back up the front, the Evo got the Mitsubishi 6G74 naturally aspirated 3.5 litre V6 engine, which is found on standard Generation 2 Pajeros, except the one in the Evo has something called, I cannot do this without notes, I've tried so many times, this is like take 100. It comes with Mitsubishi innovative valve timing and electronic lift control, aka MyVec, aka VTEC, aka variable valve timing, aka nothing special. But it did have a few internal goodies like hollow exhaust valves, and it's rumoured that it's got upgraded pistons and con rods, etc, but haven't been able to confirm any of this. If you do know the truth behind any of that, please leave a comment below. With all that, the engine revs up to an insane 7,500 horsepower.
Look, it was late, I was tired, I was trying to remember all of Mitsubishi's ridiculous acronyms. I'm sorry. It revs up to 7,500 RPM. It won't happen again. By the way, if you're liking this video, subscribe, hit like, turn on the notification bell, all that stuff. And maybe even check out the website, pavesgarage.com, where I'm selling a sweet A2 version of that poster up there, the Mitsubishi Holy Trinity. Anyway, back to watching this guy who has no idea what he's saying talk.
And puts out 276 horsepower. That 276 horsepower doesn't sound very special, but remember this car came out at the same time as the Gentleman's Agreement, in which all car manufacturers in Japan decided they weren't going to put out any cars with more than 276 horsepower, or at least they were advertised to have any more than that, but we all know that plenty of cars came out with way more than that. So we're not really sure what the true horsepower of the Pajero Evo is, but again, if you've ever dynoed one, please let us know. So to cool that 276 horsepower engine, the Pajero Evo got an aluminium bonnet with a huge air intake in it, a pretty racy looking front grille all made out of mesh, some more inlets down here, and a massive 5mm thick aluminium bash plate to protect the engine, but also has a whole bunch of holes in it to let some more inflow. To let some of that hot air out, the Pajero Evo got some functional air vents in the fenders. Nice to see a car with actual real air vents on it. All this gives the Pajero Evo what I think is one of the meanest looking front ends of any car ever made. But I'm a bit biased. So bolted on behind that engine was either a manual gearbox or a sports automatic, which came with an awesome acronym. Innovative and Intelligent Vehicle Electronic Control System, aka INVEX 2. This is just an automatic gearbox which shifts a bit quicker and adapts to the way the driver is driving, changing shift points on the fly, and also had a manual shift mode. Attached to that gearbox is Mitsubishi's legendary Super Select four-wheel drive transfer case, which is found on all Pajeros since the Generation 2. This transfer case lets you drive around all the time in rear-wheel drive, shift into four-wheel drive on the fly at up to 100 kilometers an hour, then lock the center differential if needed, and then if you really need it, get down into a low-range four-wheel drive mode with the center diff locked. So moving further back in the drivetrain, the Pajero Evo got a limited slippery differential, which could go as far as locking if one wheel lost traction completely. The last of the mechanical goodies that the Pajero Evo got was an upgraded ABS system, which came with vented disc brakes all round and some lightweight bespoke aluminium wheels. Going back to the bodywork, as well as the bonnet and wheel arches, the Pajero Evo also got some aerodynamic front and rear bumpers, as well as a pretty cool Batman wing, which helps reduce drag and also stabilises the Pajero Evo in a straight line. So moving on to the interior. The Evo got the usual Evo treatment by getting a set of Recaro seats, some smatterings of fake carbon fibre here and there, and then in the centre it got an oil gauge, a voltmeter and a digital compass to help you navigate through the desert. Needless to say, all these upgrades made the Pajero Evo fast. During the Dakar rally, it was common sight to see the Pajero overtaking the normally faster bikes, and the Pajero having to get off the established tracks to go around slower competitors. The Pajero Evo, which we all know and love, first competed in the Dakar rally in 1998, and to no one's surprise, it came first, and second, and third, and fourth. Unfortunately, 1998 was the only year that this particular Pajero Evo won. In 99 and 2000, it was beaten by some ridiculous French Renault buggy, which for some reason was allowed to compete in the same class as this thing. I don't really understand the rules enough to know why this buggy was competing in the same class as production vehicles, but if you do, leave a rant in the comments below. So in the year 2000, Mitsubishi released the Generation 3 Pajero and stopped making the Evo. Although it was no longer being produced, it seemed to serve as almost a development platform for some aspects of the Generation 3. If you take a look underneath the Generation 3s these days, and even the Generation 4s, you can still see elements of the Pajero Evo suspension sitting under there. So despite the release of the Generation 3 Pajero, there were still a lot of the Pajero Evos racing in the Dakar Rally, and they were still very competitive.
In 2001, the Pajero Evo was still so competitive that halfway through the race, it was leading by a huge margin. Its nearest competitors were the Renault buggies, which stole victory from the Evo back in 99 and 2000. So to try and get the lead back, at the start of one of the next stages, the pair of buggies took off early before the stage had opened, taking a big head start. They did this thinking they'd only get a 15-minute penalty, and thought they'd be able to gain more than 15 minutes by taking this head start. So the Pajero Evo took off and started chasing down the first buggy, which was performing a blocking manoeuvre, driving slowly on the track, trying to allow the leading buggy to get a big lead. So the Evo did what it does best, it got off the track and got ready for an overtake. During this overtaking attempt, the Evo hit a massive unseen ditch, causing some pretty significant damage to the rear suspension. But even with its ruined rear suspension, the Pajero Evo managed to get back on the road and started chasing down the buggy again, and got ready for another overtake. This overtake went a little bit better than the first one. This time they just took out a medium-sized tree, possibly causing a bit more damage to the left-hand side suspension, but they managed to get in front of the buggy. They kept chasing down the second Renault buggy for a little bit, but all the damage started to really catch up to the Evo, and eventually a tyre was torn off the rim, causing the crew to stop for repairs. Needless to say, these guys weren't too happy about this. The crew was able to repair the vehicle, and then they got back on the track and started chasing down the competitors and started regaining their lead. After the race, the marshals decided to hand a 1 hour penalty to the pair of buggies, which paved the way for Mitsubishi to take a 1-2 finish.
In 2007, the Pajero competed in the Dakar Rally for the last time. Since 1983, it had racked up a total of 12 victories, which was 5 more than its next competitor, Peugeot. Since then, sales of the Pajero have steadily declined to the point where Mitsubishi announced this year that they're killing off the Pajero name altogether. And that's the end of this video on the Pajero Evo. It's a pretty bleak note to end on, so I'm going to leave you with some of the best footage I found while researching this video. But before I cut over to that, remember to check out the website pavesgarage.com, where you can find shock absorbers for your Pajero Evolution so you don't crash yours like I did. Also get mud flaps, which will suit the Pajero Evos and just about any other four-wheel drive, and a few other Pajero Evolution goodies. See you next time.
サイクロンエンジン搭載パジェロミッドルーフ新登場今 野生が都会の感性を刺激する三菱パジェロ。
Cars entered, it was the 4 times winning mark Mitsubishi who took the opportunity to once more took the top 3 spots. Sabi, the 93 winner, led the 3 home out of the shaft, failing, or falling I should say, behind Sabi, who made it 2 out of 2. Away from Jean-Pierre Fontenay. Overall, Fontenay remained 9 minutes to the good over Sabi after 8th home, in this challenger with a vastly less powerful engine. Impressive. That one. Kenjiro Shinozuka, the king of 1997, was about to abdicate the trophy, moving to his teammate, Jean-Pierre Fontenay. There's still one more day to go. Well, the whole focus of the Dakar has now changed. The delay meant that there were now only 6 stages left before the arrival in Cairo. The time was running out for the drivers to get back into the swimming pits. Fontenay quickest comes on the stage surprisingly. A rare thing on the Dakar. The 11th stage was like a brilliant. You can see these cars following the rearview mirror, says Matsuoka, and it's absolutely magic. Hiroshi Matsuoka led the Mitsubishi dominance of the rally. Matsuoka ahead of 2001 winner Cranshitt and 1997 winner Shinozuka, with the 98 winner Fontenay just behind. Total joy on the podium for Mitsubishi.